So first I will give a little bit of background info on the facility in which I work. The facility is part of the Westminster Village Company and covers a large area of suburban land. The village includes independent living apartments, assisted living quarters, and a rehab and health center, and several detached houses and condos. From the year 1917 to the year 1969, the grounds held a tuberculosis hospital by the name of Sunnyside Sanatorium. The building has since been demolished and the assisted living quarters now stand in its place. Above the original basement, all of the current buildings are connected by a series of hallways and tunnels. The campus, being larger in scale than most retirement communities, is almost constantly under some kind of construction in one area or another. I have been working as a housekeeper in this particular facility for only about a month and a half, and I have already experienced quite a few inexplicable things. The subject of ghosts and the unknown has always intrigued me. I have experienced quite a few things in many different situations and locations throughout my life. While my past experiences have been interesting and have caused my interest in the topic to gain more respect for the spirit world, my new workplace has provided some experiences that far surpass the others I have had. The first experience I had was in the basement, which, as previously mentioned, is original to the tuberculosis hospital that was once functioned on the grounds. My mother, who also works at the facility, was showing me the old incinerator and numbered shelves which, I believe, held the bodies of those who have perished of tuberculosis before their incineration. It was around 11 p.m. and no other employees were in the basement, as only housekeeping and maintenance are located on the lower level and most workers leave around 4 p.m. Anyways, we were standing there just chatting about the history of the grounds and the incinerator and such, and a relatively loud male voice calls out, "Hello?" The voice was followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps. My mother and I, quite startled, then proceed to nope our way up the stairs in a quick fashion. The odd thing about the voice was that it didn't seem to come from one area or direction. It was almost as if the voice came from everywhere. If that makes sense, I am absolutely certain that there were no other employees in the basement at the time of this experience. The next and most prominent experience I had was about a week after I began working in the health center. The health center consists of 5 areas that house residents who need round-the-clock medical care and assistance with everyday activities. On one particular night, I was working the night shift in laundry. This shift requires the employees to deliver and collect linens from each area of the health center. I was coming from the Cedar wing with my clean linen cart and was heading back from the laundry room. Cedar is known as memory care and is therefore somewhat isolated from the rest of the building for the safety and mental well-being of the residents who may have psychological issues or dementia. As you leave Cedar, one must pass the wing that leads to the basement to get back to the rest of the health center. I casually glanced over my left shoulder before entering the door to the Heatherwood wing and was greeted with the sight of a man. This man was tall and thin and looked to be in his 30s or 40s maybe. He was wearing khaki pants and a dark long-sleeve shirt and had dark-colored hair. These were all the details that my eyes could collect before the man vanished. Yes, vanished into thin air. The most accurate way to describe the way I saw him would be in the likeness of the flash of a camera. I turned my head and saw him, and he literally vanished as quickly as I could blink. I felt no malevolent presence or any presence for that matter. I was not mentally or physically exhausted in any way, and I was by myself at the time of the incident. I simply said to the vanished man, "Hello, I'm new here, and my name is Amy," and I walked on to continue my work with a million thoughts running through my mind. This was the first time I had ever seen a full-bodied apparition, or any apparition for that matter. All previous visual experiences have involved lights or shadows. I have not seen the mysterious man or any apparition since. While working laundry, I find that hangers like to frantically swing on the rolling racks. I tried to explain this phenomenon and quickly wrote it off as airflow from the dryer vents and such. However, only select hangers will swing out of a large group and it will not happen accordingly with the dryer flow. For example, the dryers will be running. I will notice that a couple of hangers are swinging wildly. I continue my work, turn around to hang some clothing, and while the dryers are still running, the hangers are completely still. Countless other employees have reported things from shadows and lights in empty rooms to disembodied voices calling for help after all residents have been noted as asleep, and even poltergeist activity. While I cannot prove the experiences of other employees, I do believe the experiences my mother has told me about. She has been touched many times by unseen hands, has seen a smoke-like entity disappear before her eyes, and has heard voices with no source. I'm not typing this to seek verification or information of any kind. I simply enjoy learning of other paranormal experiences and thought that perhaps someone may find mine interesting. I will continue to work in the facility with an open mind and debunk as many of my experiences as I can. However, I am certain that the spirits of many linger throughout the halls. I work in a fairly busy hospital downtown in the NICU. I usually work at night, and I kid you not, this happened to me less than 5 minutes ago. I figured it would be good to get this down in writing before I forget. During orientation, we are taught to be observant to the signs of possible abductors. We are taught to look for oversized clothing, bags, and shifty behavior. Luckily, I've never encountered a strange individual until just now. It's currently 2:59 a.m., and I've been sitting at the front desk since 11. I'm a nursing student, so I usually just do clerical work around the unit. I also watch the cameras to make sure no one is here that isn't supposed to be here. It's usually pretty quiet at night. However, I've already had sort of a weird night experience, so this just adds a cherry on top of it. The NICU is a locked unit. This means that in order to gain entrance, you have to pick up a phone which then rings to the desk. Usually it's parents wanting in to see their babies and family members who are lost. It quiets down around 11, so no one usually comes in or out during my shift with the exception of housekeeping. One of the security cameras is situated so I could see who was picking up the first phone. There was a lady in baggy clothing with a sling on her arm. I answered the door and she said she wanted to find her cousin, who apparently had been brought up from the emergency department. I asked for the last name, and she unintelligibly rambled off a Latino name that I only caught the first part of. Knowing that we did not have any new admissions, I told her we didn't have anyone by that name. I tried to get some information out of her, and she again said that her cousin had been brought up from the emergency department. I told her in that case she would want to go to labor and delivery and talk to them. She hesitated and then said okay, and walked away. I got a really weird feeling from her, so I checked the census to see if there was anyone that was being assessed in labor and delivery, and there wasn't. So either she was at the wrong hospital, or she wanted into the unit to do something a little bit more sinister than to just see her cousin. I shrugged it off and figured her cousin was in labor and delivery, and she would find her and all would be well. About 5 minutes later, the same lady appeared in her extremely baggy clothing and her sling. The only difference was that this time, she was putting the sling on and was using her injured hand to mess with something in her oversized sweatshirt. She picked up the phone and once again asked to be let in to find her cousin, and that labor and delivery said that they had no one by that name. I told her the exact same thing, and that she would need to get in contact with her cousin and go back over to labor and delivery. She got hostile for a second and then hung up the phone. Whether or not she was trying to gain access to the unit for things that she shouldn't be doing, I'll never know. But creepy lady who looked like a baby snatcher, let's not meet ever again. So this story happened at my job in the Netherlands. Apologies for the long lead up. I'm 29 now. The story happened 10 years ago. At the time I was jobless, and I found a job as a security guard in an office building. The office building was in a forested area, away from any busy streets. The person who had the job before me was in a car accident and apparently was paralyzed from the waist down. Nobody was interested in the job since you worked during the night and the office building was so big. It was just boring as hell, but hey, a job is a job. Once I started, my supervisor gave me the lowdown on what I would be doing. This was my first night working by myself. I came to work and took the shift over from my colleague at 9 p.m. He told me there were still some people left in the building, so before I went up to the 15th floor, I closed the main entrance in such a way you could only exit when you're inside, so no outsiders could come in. After I did this, I went up to the 15th floor where these people were still working and asked them if they needed to go anywhere else in the building. If not, I could make my rounds and close off all the other floors, which I did. So I made my rounds and found nothing peculiar. I went back to my front desk. This was around 11:30 p.m. and the last person who was working on the 15th floor was just leaving, and the guy told me he was the last one to leave and wished me a good night. Once the last person left, I went up to the 15th floor, checked all the offices and locked it down. I went down to my front desk again. Since there were no people left, I put on the alarms on every floor, except the ground floor where my desk was. Maybe 5 minutes later, the alarm went off on the 10th floor, and there was nobody in the building. The rule is if an alarm goes off, you first call the security company before you take action. I told them I would investigate the alarm and I would call them back once I checked it out. Otherwise, if I don't call back, they would send a police officer to check it out just as a precaution. I checked the whole 10th floor and found nothing. I went back to call the security company telling them it was a false alarm. I kid you not, the alarm on the 10th floor went off like 7 times in an hour, and every time I checked the floor, I couldn't find anything or anyone there. Since this was my first day working alone and the alarm went off so many times, the security company thought I was screwing things up and wanted to file a complaint to my boss, which would mean I would lose my job I had just for a week. In retrospect, the following was the dumbest thing I could ever do, because the alarm went off again. Since I didn't want to call the security company again and cry wolf, I went to the 10th floor without informing the security company. The only thing I had on me was a mag light, since security guards in the Netherlands aren't allowed to carry guns. I went up to the 10th floor, checked the floor, and as before found nothing. The only difference now is I pretended to leave, turned off the lights and stayed on the 10th floor, listening if someone was there. In about 5 minutes, I heard someone or something moving. I was relieved and anxious at the same time, relieved I wasn't wrong and that there was something on the floor, and anxious because I didn't know what was on the floor. I turned on the lights and tried to sound as manly as possible, saying something in the line of, "I know there is someone here, show yourself." As you can imagine, no response. So stupid I didn't go down to call for help, but stupid me went looking to whatever it was I heard on the 10th floor. I walked to the office I heard the sound from, turned on the lights, and found a little girl who couldn't be older than 13, with long brown hair, in white pajamas, squatting and rocking front to back on a desk, looking straight at me. The scary thing was there was no emotion in her face or in her eyes. After almost shitting myself, I collected my nerves and took the girl by the hand. Like, what could a small girl do to a 6'8" tall guy? I took her down to the front desk, offered her a Coke, but she didn't respond whatsoever. The only thing I could do was call my supervisor and told him about what I had encountered. My supervisor's response was, "Stay there, I'll be right over." I stayed on the phone until my supervisor came. I just had this underbelly feeling with this girl, that there was something really wrong with her. Before my supervisor turned up, he called me and told me to call an asylum which was pretty close to the office building I worked at, just to check if someone was missing. Why would there be a 13-year-old girl in an office building with no houses nearby whatsoever? So that's what I did. I called the asylum, asking them if there was someone missing from the asylum, and I got the scariest response you can get. They told me, "Yes, as a matter of fact, someone is missing." I gave them the description of the girl sitting next to me, and it was in fact the girl who was missing from the asylum. They told me she was really dangerous and that I should watch my back at all cost. They immediately sent people over to take the little girl with them. A week later, my supervisor told me the story of the girl I found, since he talked with the people from the asylum. It turns out the girl killed her mom, dad, and little brother while they were asleep when she was 11. Even in the asylum, she wounded staff members, either by stabbing them with pencils or biting their ears off. To this day, we still have no clue how she got into the building. We checked all the cameras and there was no footage of her ever entering the building. My story is definitely not a poop your pants scary or anything like that, but it has left me shaken and very uneasy about working late shifts. Anyways, I had just finished my first year of college, and I had taken up a position as a taxi dispatcher with my boyfriend's cousin's taxi company. For the first week and a half, I worked mainly day shifts until the owner decided to extend the hours to 24/7, and I was the lucky employee who would be covering 3 or 4 of those shifts a week. The next week, I was working my first night shift alone. The driver would be out all night looking for fares, which meant a lot of the night would be just me. I wasn't uneasy about working such a shift by myself since I had worked at a 24-hour coffee shop, and I was used to midnight shifts. It was also a Wednesday or Thursday night, so it wasn't very busy. The best part about this job was that my boss let me use the internet so I could play video games on my laptop in the office. From the computer desk in the office, I could see the front door, a portion of the front desk, and most of the front windows so I could keep a close eye on what was happening outside. Plus, the bell above the door always alerted me to a new customer so I wouldn't be caught off guard if I got too into my game. On this particular night, I was working with a taxi driver named Dave. Dave is about 6'3" and 300 pounds, plus he suffers from several health problems, one of which made all of his movements slow and painful. He definitely wasn't Mr. Fitness or the type of person who would be able to defend themselves or others very easily. Sometime during the early hours of the morning, Dave gets a call to go pick up someone in town 15 minutes away. He gathered up his stuff and drove into the night while I headed into the office and continued playing my video game. About 15 minutes later, I caught something over the top of my laptop. My mind froze. I could hear panting, and in the reflection of the window, I could see someone sitting in one of the waiting chairs. I walked to the doorway that connects to the front room with the office. I glanced into the sitting area and nearly shit bricks. Some guy with a massive rat tail had managed to ninja his way into the office and was now sitting in one of the chairs with his face buried in his hands, panting heavily. He was dirty, sweaty, and sounded like he had just ran a marathon. Now, the rat tail should have tipped me off, but I found it more hilarious than frightening. A few moments passed and I finally got up the courage to ask him if he needed a cab. He didn't respond at first. I asked him again and he looks up at me. I took a step back into the office. His face was scratched and covered in blood from the wound on the top of his head. I was shocked and immediately offered assistance to him. He replies with, "I'm fine. I don't need no help. I just want to go home." I asked him if he needed a cab, and if so, where was he going? He told me he lives about 20 minutes away and he wants Dave to take him home. After that, shit started to get weird. I called over to Dave using the radio to tell him that there was a fare in the office and that he wanted a ride. He told me he'd be another 10 minutes. My hand was on the phone the entire time in case this guy made any sudden movements. Instead of going back into the office, I decided it was best to stay out front where there are 2 great big bay windows that make it easy to see what is happening inside the taxi office. I didn't feel as though he was a threat at all, but he seemed really angry at something, so I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, people would be able to see it. So I walked into the front room, and as I got closer to the gentleman, that's when I see it. He's not just bleeding from the head, but from the shoulder and knee. I ask him again if he's okay, then I offer to call an ambulance for him. Bad idea. "No, you don't need to be doing that," he told me. "It ain't like I killed nobody, right? I never killed nobody. Don't go doing that. You don't need to call anyone. I just want to go home." "I'm sorry, I just noticed that you were bleeding pretty badly and I thought maybe you'd like someone to make sure you're okay," I replied. "I didn't kill nobody. That asshole should have kept his mouth shut. He had what was coming to him. He shouldn't have said those things. But it ain't like I killed nobody. You don't need to call nobody. I just want to go home." Okay, I tell him. "But you're bleeding." "It ain't like I killed nobody," he replied. "I swear I didn't kill nobody. Please don't call the cops. I don't need the cops. I just need to go home. I didn't kill anyone." Silence for a few minutes. He notices the phone clutched in my hand. "I fell down," he blurted out. "Pardon?" "I fell," he repeated. "That's why I'm bleeding. I fell. It ain't like I killed nobody." He got up and started pacing. He was growing impatient for his cab and I was scared shitless. Blood was now on the chair and floor. I had the phone in my hand and every once in a while he broke the silence with another string of incoherent babblings about how he had done nothing wrong because he hadn't killed anyone and that I didn't need to call the cops because he was a good guy. Eventually, Dave radios over that he is about 2 minutes away and I breathed a sigh of relief. He pulled up out front. The man gets into the car and they drive off. Now I'm worried for Dave, so I called the cops. I reported what happened and they followed the taxi cab to this guy's house where they arrested him. Turns out this guy had run away from a nearby bar after he had physically assaulted a fellow patron, injured him with a sharp object, took off running, fell, and managed to find his way to the taxi office. During his time in the cab office, the police had been searching for him, so technically no, he didn't kill anyone, but he did assault and attempt to kill someone. I also found out that one of the other drivers, Steven, knew the guy from high school years ago. His name is Duke and he has a history of violence. He also has a history of coming home drunk and cracking his wife's skull open from time to time. Whatever he had planned that night, I couldn't say, but I'm just glad that the guy ended up in a drunk tank for the night. His wife was unharmed and the guy who got stabbed didn't die. At least I assume he didn't, since I still see Duke every now and then walking the streets with his glorious rat tail, which means he didn't get arrested. But in all seriousness, I wish you guys could have seen this rat tail. That thing was impressive. Hey guys, thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Army. I'm always looking for new soldiers in my Nightmare Nation. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope all of you had a really good Tuesday too. And I just want to ask you guys, the series that I've been doing every Friday, unfortunately part 6 isn't out yet, so I just want to ask you guys, what do you guys want for a Friday video? Do you want a creepypasta? Do you want a no sleep scary story? Or do you want something a bit different? You know, Glitch in the Matrix, Deep Web, anything and everything? Leave it down in the comments below and I will choose. But anyways guys, on a more important note, I have to ask, have you guys been playing Resident Evil 4 on the PlayStation 4? And that rhymed, that was weird. But anyways guys, I recently just bought that game and I swear to God it is like a giant nostalgia bomb. I remember playing that game when it was back on the GameCube, and that was awesome. I mean, that game had me addicted. That was like the only game other than Smash Brothers I played on the GameCube. Just a crazy good game, and just, oh my God, when I played that game and I'm just like shooting all these zombies where technically they're not zombies, but you get my drift. I'm just shooting all of them. I'm like, damn, this is so awesome. But, oh God, I always get off topic like this in my videos. I'm sorry about that, guys. But anyways, guys, as always, thank you all for watching, and just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.